Just a little information for all our participants today. The link for submitting your information for issuing of certificates is posted in the live chat box as well as in the description of this webinar. It is a Google Form link which will automatically expire by 7 p.m. today. So after the webinar, please do take the time to fill it. Now moving ahead, it is a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, who is going to talk to us about management of burns. He is an award-winning plastic surgeon and a recipient of the Dr. Sundarajanan Gold Medal in Plastic Surgery. He has done his MBBS and MS General Surgery from FMC Pune. He is a member of the National Academy of Medical Sciences and has also authored a chapter in the textbook of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery, Volume 5, Burns. Presently Professor and HOD Plastic Surgery, Command Hospital Western Command, Chandimandir. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure in welcoming Colonel DJ Sharma, our honorable speaker for today.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I believe most of my audience today is undergraduate medical students. So I will try to be touching upon basics of management of burns, which will help them and interns and accident and emergency workers to understand what we want you to do for the management of burn patients. Burns is a major cause of death and disability. Prior to 1945, the burns were being managed in surgical wards without a burn center concept. In 1945, after a fire in US, interactive multidisciplinary team was instituted and a burn center concept came. It basically works on the principle of continued and supervised resuscitation, rehabilitation, reconstruction, and psychosocial support. 9% of all the burn cases happening around require hospitalization. There are approximately 2 million cases each year all over the world. The Indian data is not available, but in most of the burn conferences which I have attended, India is labeled as capital of burn patients and burn care. 44% of the cases happen due to flames, 29% due to hot liquids. 76% of these cases happen at home and 18.3% are industrial accidents. You'll be surprised to know that 25% of all these cases are children below the age of 6 years and 80% of them suffer from scalds, either because of spillage of hot water or inappropriate storage of hot water, hot liquids, which generally spill over these toddlers and babies. The burns are predominantly in males, those are in industrial settings. And in India, it is also very common in low socioeconomic class because of cramped up living spaces, where in one room they are sharing cooking area, sleeping area, as well as feeding of the children and maybe bathing at times. So coming down to type of burns, basically it depends upon the agent which is causing the burn. It could be thermal when there is a flame, naked flame causing the burn, or chemical, both acid and alkali. The electrical burns, both low voltage and high voltage. White phosphorus, which is mostly in industries and in war, and radiation injuries. You must have heard the accident which happened sometime back, few years back in Delhi, where they were trying to extract certain, you can say, radioactive material from a tank, and they caused radiation burns to these individuals. Now, what does a dermal barrier or the skin do? It basically preserves our body fluid. It does thermoregulation and it's an infection barrier. So once you have suffered a burn injury, these three things are the primary pathologies which are going to happen. Your body fluid regulation will go, the individual's thermoregulation will go, and they will become more prone for infections. Now, how do we classify burns or how we assess the burns? The most common formula which is used world over in most of the accident and emergency scenario is rule of Wallace, that is rule of 9. It divides various body parts into the percentage of 9, starting from head and neck to limbs, trunk and external genitalia. This is a rough guide. You also should remember the percentage, the 1% in this rule is equivalent to the palmar surface of the patient and not of the doctor or the assessor. However, for children, we don't follow rule of 9. We follow what is called as rule of 5 because their head and neck area and the trunk areas are more than their limb areas. So you should be careful when you are assessing children below the age of 5 years. You should apply this rule of 5 instead of rule of 9. More scientific way of assessing is using what is called as Lund-Browser chart. This gives a more accurate percentage of body surface area, and you can notice there are three areas which changes as the age changes. These areas are A, which is half of the head, B, half of the thigh, and C, half of one leg. So if you calculate, this will also come out to be 100%. But this is much more scientific in assessment of burn surface area. The second assessment which we do is depth of the skin. Now you must understand and you must recall our skin has got certain layers. We have epidermis, which is comprising of 5 layers of cell layers. Then we have dermis, which is papillary and reticular dermis. Then is subcutaneous fat or tissues, and then is muscle or bone. We will see how we will gauge the depth. Now on the left hand side, you should see this pictogram of skin depth, and on the right side you will get an idea how clinically these wounds look like. Now first degree burn is only involvement of epidermis, this pink area on top you should see here. Okay, so the stratum bacillum is preserved, bacillus is preserved. Okay, so basically these are having red hyperemic surface. It is very painful because nerve endings are being damaged. However, this heals within 4 to 7 days. Most common example is sunburns. The second degree superficial burns or superficial partial thickness burns are burns which involve the entire of epidermis and upper part of papillary dermis. Now here healing occurs by proliferation of epithelial cells from hair follicles and sweat ducts. So what happens clinically? Clinically, blisters are present. This is extremely painful, and if there is no complications, that is it should not get converted into full thickness burn. If you are properly managing this wound should heal in 2 weeks with minimum of scarring. Coming down to second degree deep burns. Now what happens? See, the depth of burn is involving almost all of the dermis. Now here, obviously, once you have so much damage, the proliferation of epithelial cells from hair follicles and sweat glands ducts will be slower, and hence they will not fully recover or heal without a surgical intervention. Clinically, these are dry looking, leathery looking like wounds. These are hypoesthetic, these are less painful. So mind you, if the patient is not crying of pain in emergency, it is a sinister feature. Basically, your patient has got deep burns and that is why he is not crying. They can heal in 3 to 4 weeks time, but most of these burns will require some amount of surgical care or surgical intervention in terms of putting skin grafts for complete wound closure. Now coming to third degree burns. Here what happens, the subcutaneous tissues also get involved. Now there are no tissues left in epidermis and dermis from where the epithelial cell come and heal this. So basically they cannot heal spontaneously. And if you look at the clinical picture, what happens? These are dry, brown, black or white, leathery tissue. What is very classical is this thrombosed vein. You can see this black thing here. This is a thrombosed vein in subcutaneous tissue. If you are seeing this, you will be 100% sure that this is a deep burn. Now the fourth degree burns are the extensive damage which happens to muscle or bone lying underneath the surface. There is no way this can heal on its own, requires a surgical intervention, and at times the stay of patient is very prolonged because you have to address not only the burn tissue, you also have to check for infection and leading, which can lead to sepsis or septic shocks. Now who should be admitted to burn center? These guidelines are taken from American Burns Association, which defines that a patient of burns with 15% total burn surface area of second degree burn or 5% percentage burn in third degree burns should be admitted. Burns of critical areas like face, feet, hand and perineum should be admitted. All electrical and lightning burns should be admitted. Burns associated with other trauma. Say a patient has fallen from a building, burning building. So he will have some fractures. So you need to admit such patients. Any percentage of burns in extreme of age, say less than 10 years or more than 50 years should be admitted. Any concomitant medical illness, say diabetes, hypertension, cardiac issues, seizures, patient should be admitted. Wherever you are thinking clinically that it may be a case of child abuse, patient should be admitted. Infected burns, small fourth degree deep burns and neglected patients without saying should be admitted and should be given institutional care. Now see what happens, these burns wounds are dynamic wounds. What you have assessed on first day may become something else on second day. It is generally said even most experienced surgeons are wrong on first day of assessment, because actually they are not wrong, because the wound is dynamic. It changes by the time other person see this. And how this happens, it is basically defined by coagulation necrosis given by Jackson in theory of thermal wounds. Now you have three zones: the zone of coagulation, zone of stasis and zone of hyperemia. If you look carefully clinically, if you have observed that all burn wound will have a zone which will be red, surrounding area will be red, and you see here a third degree depiction. Okay, now between this red zone and the zone which is black, which is burnt, is the zone of stasis. Now if the perfusion is maintained well in this zone of stasis, the wound will shrink, and if the perfusion is not maintained well, this will gradually progress into zone of coagulation. So it will become a deeper burn and even the surface area will increase. So you have to carefully assess patient every day and that is why depth and percentage can change on subsequent days, both ways, plus and minus. So what happens? What are the direct effects? Severity of skin damage, basically it is dependent on intensity and duration of injury. More the time of contact with a burnt, a hot body or a water body, more will be the burn. The viscous product, that is oil, ghee and melted fabrics, they causes more damage because simmering effect of hot liquid continue for a longer time, and thus it will lead to either skin loss, which is partial or full thickness. Now what are indirect effects? Indirect effects are the one which basically decide whether patient is going into burn shock, or it is going to be a prolonged stay in hospital, or there will be other complications. What happens is fluid shifts and there are circulatory disturbances. We will come to it when we will talk about management issues. It affects peripheral circulation. Concomitant inhalation injuries can damage your lungs. Then you have something called burn wound infection, which is most dreaded by most of the people in burn centers also. And then long-term metabolic effect, nutritional effect, and immunological effects. Immunological effects also comprises of reduced immunity of the patient, and they become more vulnerable to various infections. Now, what happens in fluid shifts and circulatory disturbances? It generally lasts 18 to 24 hours with a peak on 6 to 8 hours. The capillary permeability increases, and thus there is a shift of fluid from intravascular compartment to extravascular compartment. It causes reduced blood flow to cells, and there is obviously a plasma volume loss. And like we said, it will cause edema in tissues, which is zone of stasis. Now, if you are able to maintain perfusion in this zone of stasis, the depth and surface area of burns will obviously decrease. And who mediate all this? Is basically your kinins, your prostanoids, histamine and oxygen-free radicals. This is all part of inflammation. Second year students must understand this. This is part of inflammatory process and inflammation which you must be aware of. Now what happens? After 24 hours, this capillary permeability returns to normal. However, the cardiac output becomes supranormal, which is at the onset of hypermetabolic phase, and it can last up to 2 weeks. Blood pressure may be low or low normal. There will be circulating myocardial depressing factor, which can cause injury to myocardium as well. The timely resuscitation reverses this heart contractility, and you can also have loss of red blood cells. With your knowledge of pathology, you will know that RBCs have a lifespan of 120 days. But after the burn injury or burn trauma, this lifespan can decrease as less as 30 days. So what we should do? Now that you have a basic idea what are the problems, how the burn has happened, and you have assessed the patient, what can be done? Now something is called primary care, which can be done at the site of accident itself. Remove patient from the source of heat, most obvious. But a savior must take all precautions and safeguard himself so that he doesn't get injury while evacuating that patient. Okay. All burning clothes are to be removed. You can cover burns with dry sterile sheets. If you don't have any sterile sheet, you can cover it with any clean sheet. If the transportation time to the hospital is more than 20 minutes, ideally you should put an IV line. You should check airway, that there are no blockages in airway, and if you have oxygen in ambulance, you can start patient on that. Do not give anything to drink and do not apply ice. The most common mistake done in every household is to put ice. Ice is not to be put. What you can put is normal tap water at room temperature. If the accident has happened in a closed space, say it has happened in a very small kitchen, must give oxygen to these patients while transporting. Defibrillation may be required in electrical burns patient, and Like I said, remove all clothing and thoroughly rinse it with normal tap water. That is the most essential step to decrease the percentage and depth of the burn. What we do when we receive the patient? First thing first, weigh the patient. Most of the burn centers will have a weighing trolley on which you can wheel in patient along with its trolley and the weight is taken. You will understand why weight is taken is for the purpose of calculation of fluid and later on for the purpose of calculation of calories and nutrition. What should be an ideal resuscitation room? It should be a sterile room with availability of sterile dressings, gowns, gloves, masks, caps. Ideally, it should be a one room bed in single room. You should have a suction machine handy and you should have all this. A Foley's catheter for catheterization, ringer lactate solution, IV sets, two wide bore cannula needle or long line should be available. If you have a shower trolley, you can give bath to the patient, wash all the burnt area thoroughly, clean it nicely, and then these are other equipment which you should have: a transport ventilator or a normal ventilator and an SpO2 monitor. It will give us an indirect measure of oxygenation and whether patient requires any ventilation or not. We'll talk about inhalation burns and CO poisoning in a little while. So what is the resuscitation fluid? There is always a debate going between crystalloids and colloids. The plasma volume changes independent of colloid in first 24 hours, and that is why crystalloids become much more favored agent for resuscitation. After 24 hours, the colloid is retained in plasma compartment. So what we commonly use is Parkland formula for first 48 hours for resuscitation. There are many formulas available. Most common and most easiest one to use is Parkland formula. What is it? It is basically ringer lactate. You will give 4 ml per kg per percent of burn. Now you understand why the weighing of patient was done and you have already assessed the percentage of burn. So it will give you what volume is to be given over next 24 hours. Point here to be noted, this 24 hours period does not start from the point you have received the patient. This 24-hour period starts from the point of incident, time of incident. Say patient has suffered a burn injury at 8 o'clock in the morning and you have received him at 12 in the afternoon. But volume will be calculated from morning 8 to next day 8 o'clock. So whatever time lapse has happened, that is of 4 hours, you have to give that fluid. Once you have calculated this fluid, 50% of this fluid has to be given in first 8 hours. And rest of the fluid is to be given in next 16 hours. Point to be noted, in children, along with this 4 ml, you will require what is called as maintenance fluid. So for first 10 kgs, you have to add 100 ml per kg. For second 10 kgs, you have to add 50 ml per kg. And for third 10 kg, you have to add 20 ml per kg. The Shriners Institute gives a formula where they say 5.6 ml per kg per percent burn is sufficient for children. So if you are not very capable of doing this, you can replace here 4 ml to be replaced by 5.6 ml. The solution of choice remains ringer lactate, whether it is an adult or child. So how you monitor? The easiest way to monitor is urine output. In adult, we take it as 0.5 ml per kg per hour. So it will work out around 30 to 50 ml. Whereas in children, we want more urine output, that is 1 ml per kg per hour. Okay. Now in many times you are not able to record blood pressure in these patients because upper arms are burned. So the urine output is an indirect measurement of your kidney perfusion as well. And that is why urine output is the topmost bedside monitoring for a burn patient. Now you should monitor vitals, that is pulse, respiration, as frequently as possible. Many centers do it for first 8 hours every half an hour and thereafter every hour. Look for sensorium, check for electrolytes, check for pH. Now pH is very significant in the way if you are having metabolic acidosis, you may need to intervene early and to put this patient on ventilatory support. Same thing goes for blood gases. Pulmonary wedge pressure not used nowadays because of various controversies attached with it. Now what happens in second 24 hours? We were talking of 48 hours, so we come down to second day. Second day we said colloid is going to be retained in intravascular compartment. So we will add plasma. We can have fresh frozen plasma if your blood bank supplies that. That is 0.3 to 0.5 ml per kg percent burn. Or if you are not going to give fresh frozen plasma, you can give 5% albumin, which is generally 1 gram per kg per day. Now, once you are starting albumin, we want this for body build. Okay. And this will also attract fluid from extravascular compartment into intravascular compartment by increase in osmotic pressure. We have to give electrolyte maintenance. We have to give some ringer lactate. This is generally 1500 to 2000 ml per meter square. Now there is a rough conversion formula wherein you can put body weight age to come down to what is the body surface area. Along with it, we give electrolyte free 5% dextrose. Generally, it is given about 2 liter, and this is a maintenance fluid for an adult. The monitoring, similar thing, body weight has to be monitored, and you monitor serum electrolytes and urinary electrolytes, hematocrit, and serum protein and albumin. So this is for the first 48 hours fluid requirement. Now what happens after 48 hours? After 48 hours, if you can see, there is a hypermetabolic response which peaks generally at 1 week and it will persist till such time burn wound is closed. The cardiac output remains 2 times normal in 40% burns and above. You have to factor in the evaporative water losses from the burnt area. See, you have lost that one function of your dermal barrier. The water cannot be retained inside, it is being evaporated. The burn patient maintain a positive sodium and water balance for 2 weeks of injury, and then that leads to associated diuresis. You will realize on 3rd, 4th, 5th day patient produce lot of urine, and that is because of this positive balance. However, you may be losing a lot of potassium. These patients will roughly require 2 to 3 units of blood transfusion every week, as we talked about that lifespan of RBCs are decreased. After 48 hours, you monitor this patient weekly body weight record. You do every 3rd or 5th day serum electrolytes, hematocrit, and serum albumin. What are the calorie requirements? Now there are various formulas you will come across in the textbooks. The most common and most easiest formula I have given it here. Basically, for adult, we require something for maintenance and something for healing. So maintenance is 25 kilocalorie per kg, and for burns 40 kilocalorie per percent of the burn. Similarly, children require much more for their daily maintenance. They will require 65 to 80 kilocal per kg, and percentage burns same as 40 kilocal. Protein requirements are increased because proteins are burnt. So we need to have protein available for bodybuilding, muscle mass, and also for normal basal requirement. Now basal requirement is about 3 to 5 gram per kg body weight, and for burn it is 1 gram per percent burn. Now children will require more of protein for body weight. So a rough formula is 1331. For adults, it is 1 gram per kg for body weight and 3 gram for percent burn. And in children, it is reverse. 3 gram for body weight and 1 gram for percent burn. You have to assess peripheral circulation. Now see, once you are doing fluid resuscitation, many of times these limbs will become edematous because eschar is the burnt skin, which may be circumferential and which will cause vascular insufficiency in the peripheral areas, that is fingers and arms and forearms. They can become very tight. Basically, to avoid that, you can elevate the limbs, but if you feel that vascular insufficiency is very high and it is likely to cause gangrene, what you need to do is a bedside procedure called escharotomy. Now see, escharotomy is a bedside procedure. You don't require anesthesia. You are only cutting the burnt dead area. You are making these white lines are the incision lines through which you are going to cut and relieve the edema so that circulation reaches to the periphery. Whereas fasciotomy requires a proper anesthesia. That is an OT procedure and not a bedside procedure. Now what we were talking of, inhalation injuries. This is very important for us people who are staying in Himachal and winters are coming. People have got a habit of leaving burnt coal inside their bedrooms and sleeping with it. And what we have is, along with inhalation injuries, we will have carbon monoxide poisoning. Now, inhalation injuries happens when burn takes place in a very close space. Clinically, patients will have burns over nose, oral opening, mouth, and rhinorrhea. It also depends on, see, if you look at here, this is how a patient with inhalation injury looks like. You will have burns around nose, mouth. There will be charcoal particles in nostrils and mouth. Nasal hair will be singed. There will be an intraoral swelling. The most common indication that patient is having inhalation injury is the change of voice. The voice will become hoarse and gradually it will become squeaky. It means it is leading to pharyngeal edema. Now you can have inspiratory stridor, you can have wheezing, you can have carbon particles in sputum. Point to be noted, all these patients should be electively ventilated or intubated if you feel that their pharyngeal edema is going to increase. Once the edema has taken place, intubation of such patient becomes very difficult. What it does to the lungs. Now once you have inhaled so much of hot air, gases, toxic fumes, there will be something called activation of complement. That is, C5A is released, neutrophil chemotaxis will take place, it will get trapped in pulmonary capillaries which will release hydroxyl radicals and free oxygen radicals, and it will further cause endothelial damage and capillary leak, finally leading to pulmonary edema. What happens in carbon monoxide poisoning? 80% of deaths in first 24 hours happens because of carbon monoxide poisoning. It has got 200 times more affinity for hemoglobin than oxygen, and that is why it decreases oxygen delivery capacity of blood and causes hypoxia. The CNM symptoms are of carboxyhemoglobin whenever it is more than 60%. SpO2 monitoring is not helpful because it will always show a false value. Basically, you have to look for hypoxic features, and in CNS patient will be in delirium, and it also has a long-term neuropsychiatric sequelae. So like we said, upper airway burns affects nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, glottis, trachea, which is very common with steam and also common with combustion products, fume of cyanides. So it causes a maximum insult in 24 to 48 hours. Whereas lower airway burns, we will have involvement of terminal bronchioles and alveolar line damage. 4 to 7 days after injury you will come to know, and patient will frequently land up in ARDS, adult respiratory distress syndrome. Okay, so what are the indication for ventilation? A respiratory rate of 40, PO2 of less than 60 and PCO2 of more than 50 mm. Tracheostomy is indicated if patient is not going to come out of ventilator in next 2 weeks time. Now the other important aspect, burn wound infection. What happens? Wound gets contaminated soon after injury, but this is surface colonization. Gradually, these bacteria they penetrate through avascular eschar, and when the eschar starts separating out from the normal tissues, there is something called sub-eschar suppuration. Now, this pus, once you lift off the eschar tissue, you will see pus underneath, and it will also bleed. That is the time these bacteria will get into your circulation, leading to systemic sepsis, and it generally happens after 7 to 10 days of initial injury, and that is why you will realize the patient will be doing very fine for first week, and in second and third week suddenly patient will develop a very high fever, features of sepsis, and goes into septic shock. In spite of your best of efforts, patient is going to go. So what dressing we should give? The dressing choice is dependent on various factors. What is available? How do we choose? Does the patient have a say? Does we consider cost? Are choices restricted by a protocol? And how do we evaluate? See, all these factors are very important when patient comes from a poor socioeconomic group and he is being managed in a government setup which is already resource crunched. The ideal dressing should be a dressing that create an environment for healing. It should also do wound debridement, it should also clean the wound, and it should remove excess of exudate. It should not lead to excessive bleeding, and it should be actually protective of the wound and support healing. So ideally a dressing should be with the one which is non-adherent. It can be films, it can be hydrogels, it can be hydrofiber dressing, it can be hydrocolloids, foams, alligenates, a mix of all this. But what we use is what is available to us. You can manage patient with open dressings or occlusive dressing. If you are not covering it with a secondary layer, it is called open dressing. See in the first picture, like this facial burns, we are using soframycin ointment, and which is left open. Every few hours, say 4 to 6 hours, we are covering the face with ointment. Whereas in occlusive dressing, you are applying the cream, which could be silver sulfadiazine, and then you are covering with a secondary dressing, and you change it either after 10 to 12 hours, or if soakage is more, then whenever they are getting wet, you replace it with a fresh secondary dressing. Most common used topical antimicrobial agent in our country is 1% silver sulfadiazine. It is water miscible, it gives good coverage, painless, it do penetrate eschar to some extent. Rarely it causes hypersensitivity and neutropenia and thrombocytopenia. The problem with 1% sulfur sulfadiazine is it also lead to formation of what we call as pseudo eschar. The burn wound is healing underneath, but you will feel that they are getting deeper because it is giving a leathery appearance on top. The experienced burn carer, burn givers will be able to tell you what is a pseudo eschar and whether wound is healing or not. For partial thickness burns, there are so many things which are available, which are either colloidal or hydrogels or duoderm. Basically, what you are doing is you are protecting the wound with these layers so that the pain decreases. The nerve endings which are open are covered. Like I said, the healing is happening from within. The epithelial cells are coming from hair follicles and sweat gland ducts, and this wound will heal in up to 10 days to 2 weeks. The most common dressing these days which is being used are silver dressing. Basically, they contain various forms of silver. Many of them are available in the market. Okay. You can also use them in a partially infected wound because silver acts as a antimicrobial, and they are required to be changed every third to fifth day. In young children, if the dressing is adherent, we don't try to remove it unless there is a pus or there is sign or features of sepsis. What we do is we rehydrate these dressings every second, third day with distilled water. Normal saline is not used because it can precipitate the silver in these dressings. Now, what is burns wound excision or the tangential excision? What we do, we remove all the burnt area using a knife in the OT. You cut thin layer by layer till all the dead tissue is removed and there is a healthy bleeding underneath, and then these are covered with skin graft. Tangential excision is ideally done between third to fifth day of the injury. Otherwise, beyond fifth day, the bleeding will be too much, and in initial 48 hours, like I said, wound is dynamic. We may be very happy that we have excised a wound, but in essence, we have partially done the excision. Like I said, skin grafting is the mainstay. This is an electric dermatome. This is a handheld Humvees knife, and this is a skin mesher. The skin mesher is used to decrease the surface area of the skin graft by meshing it. This is how a skin, when you put a meshed skin graft, this is how it looks like on a patient. Now you can have something called biological wound coverings. Most commonly available with us is these days are commercially available collagen dressings. It comes both in wet form and dry form, which is harvested from animal. Cadaver hemografts are still lacking in India. There are very few centers which are managing this with their skin bank facilities. One is National Burn Center in Bombay, and another one is Safdarjung Hospital in Delhi. Human amnion can be used in resource crunch area, but it has got its own demerits because you have to test the mother from where you are taking this amniotic membrane. She should be HIV and HBsAg free, and there is a methodology to prepare this amnion and store it and use it in burns, mostly scalds. Integra is launched in India last year. These are basically two-layered dressings, or you can say these are skin substitutes. We suture this into the wound once it is clean of all infection. The top layer is removed after 2 weeks, which is made of silicone and replaced by skin graft. This leads to less contracture formation and gives a very good wound healing. Then there are something called culture allogenic keratinocytes. These are very thin skin sheets. However, that is why you need to have a dermal layer which Integra provides. And on top you can use this. BioBrain is similarly double layer dressing and still not available in India because of ethical issues. Collagen, like I said, the upper one is a wet dressing, the lower one is a dry dressing, available commercially in India, both forms, and very good and helpful. What happens? Long-term complications. See this. This is a contracture formation. The thumb won't open, the finger won't open. So all these patients will undergo multiple surgeries. And how to avoid these contractures is while you are treating these patients, while you are dressing them up, you get hold of your orthotist or occupational therapist who will make splints and keep this joint fully functional. But most of these patients who have got deep burns are operated. See this, she can't open her mouth. There is a neck contracture here. Contracture of neck is released, lip is released so that she can have a comfortable mouth opening. Corneal opacity. If the eyes are involved in burns, it can lead to blindness as well. Tracheal web. It happens in cases where you have done prolonged ventilation. Hypertrophic scar. Very, very common. There is hypertrophic scarring and keloid formation. These patients will keep coming back to us whether it can be removed or not. Like you must have studied in your pathology, the keloid and hypertrophic scars are aberrant healing. So how we manage this? I'll just show you some pressure garments. Other complications are Curling's ulcer. In head injury, what we get? Cushing's ulcer. So in GI, what we get is Curling ulcer. There is something called superior mesenteric artery syndrome. It is because of loss of body fat and the artery get compressed. You can also have acute pancreatitis, acute acalculous cholecystitis, myocardial infarction. I said myocardial depressing factors are there in circulation and infections. All other than skin wound, you have infection of lungs, septic thrombophlebitis, UTI, etc. What are the recent advances? Recent advances, basically people have been using heparin both topically, intravenously and nebulization, basically to decrease pain and to promote neoangiogenesis. Then is something called epidermal growth factor, region D ointment, which also helps in neoepithelialization. Very useful in children. Then you can use human growth factor. However, human growth factors have been found more useful in children than in adults. Fibrin glue. This is basically we can use for covering the, when you are using skin graft to make them stay in place, you can use this, and this is a natural glue and helps in promoting the tissue healing and neoangiogenesis. You can also put what is called as VAC dressing. This is a skin graft put in here. Because this area is so that we cannot use any kind of dressing, we have put in VAC. VAC is a negative pressure wound therapy system where with the help of vacuum you are putting the graft and keeping it in place. Now these are the pressure garments I was talking about, prevention of keloids and hypertrophic scarring. Once it has happened, then also we should use this. This give continuous pressure to the healed area and decreases the contracture and keloid formation. Along with it, you can use silicone sheets. Silicone gel sheets are commercially available, which can be placed, and then you can use them. On top of them, you can use this pressure compression garment so that your compression are for a prolonged time, generally 23 hours a day. Any questions?
You can chat box में to type in the chat box.
You can type in your questions in the chat box and I would be happy to reply. Why should the patient not be given water? Okay, Shweta has asked why should the patient not be given water? See, in case you are going to intubate that patient, the water is going to come back into the respiratory tract. That is one. Second is all these patients, they develop sometime paralytic ileus. Okay. So generally in first 24 hours, we try to avoid giving fluids in avoid giving oral fluids in major burns. However, these days we try to feed them as early as possible so that translocation of gut bacteria does not cause systemic infection. Why don't we use ice in burns? Ice will cause thermal burns again. See, it is a negative temperature. You must have heard something called uh, cold injuries, frostbite. So you are basically doing more harm if you are using ice. It is better to cool off that area using normal tap water. Hot oil burn, like I said, must put it under the tap water, and you should keep on putting tap water or water at room temperature till such time patient tells you that there is no more burning sensation felt. Okay, because oil has got a higher temperature and it sticks to the body surface, it will have a simmering effect. So the duration of water pouring should be very long. The removal of dead skin is done where every day while dressings are being done, they just separate on its own. You are doing removal of skin under anesthesia only if you are undertaking patient for tangential excision. Like I said, you remove all the dead tissue and put it graft straight away, and that can be done only after third to fifth day.
Snake skin.
That is not snake skin. What people are using these days are collagen dressing. It is harvested from bovine or porcine sources, and this collagen is used as dressing. I don't know from where you got this idea of snake skin. That is not snake skin. That is collagen. Electrical wound management, Rahul, I will teach you. You don't worry about it.
Is potato peel and amniotic membrane still used for dressing?
Potato peel is not used these days, but like I said, in financially constrained areas, people are still using it. But amniotic membrane, yes, you can use it if you are 100% sure that source, the mother is HIV and HBsAg free and the amniotic membrane is prepared as per protocol. You need to wash it, preserve it in 80% glycerol solution and then rehydrate and then use it. Then amniotic membrane can be used. Mostly it is used for children with scald injuries.
What after tap water? What else?
What else can be done at home? You can apply Silverex cream if you have, or Bernol, but please don't use ink, toothpaste. All these things cause more damage. They are all skin irritants. Basically what you need to use it, the agent which can soothe the burning sensation.
So what is the chamber in which we keep burn patients called semi-tube-like chamber?
There is no semi-tube-like chamber. These are basically cradles which cover the naked patient. Most of the time, these patients cannot be given proper clothing. So we make a cradle. These are half-cut tube kind of a thing which is put on the patient's bed and covered with blankets or the bed sheet.
Some people apply toothpaste in burns. Is it helpful?
I have already answered this. No toothpaste, please. No ink, please.
There are maggots used to remove dead tissues.
Maggots are used for very deep wounds, not exactly in burns, but many kind of deep wounds are managed with maggot therapy in a controlled way. These maggots basically help in debridement, biological debridement.
Recently, some are using fish skin for treatment. How it works?
Skin fish is same as collagen. Like I said, you have these products coming as a commercial product. Basically, all of them are collagen dressings. Now, collagen helps in reepithelialization faster. Okay, it is a biological dressing which is an inert dressing. It saves wound from the infection. It sticks to the wound and you don't have to remove it. It will start coming out on its own from the edges. Unless there is an infection inside, these collagen dressing will remain in place.
और कोई any question पूछ लेंगे उनको और से.
Any more questions?
What is the chamber in which we keep And sir, why do we rehydrate the dressing? Won't water cause higher chance of infection of wounds?
Rehydration is caused by distilled water. I clearly mentioned it of the dressing because these dressing after some time will become very stiff. The exudate from the wound will get absorbed in the dressing and then dressing will be painful. So rehydration is required for basically once to keep the dressing soft and secondly to keep these silver which is there, it keeps on getting released into the wound.
Sir, excision is done with general anesthesia.
Tangential excision mostly is done under general anesthesia. Over limbs, it can be done under regional anesthesia.
Management of blister.
Now, management of blister is a very controversial thing. Many centers advocate that blisters should not be punctured. Many centers say that blisters should be removed. What we generally do is, if it is a small size blister, we can just puncture and get the fluid out, but don't de-roof the thing. Let the skin remain there, which will work as a biological dressing. But if the blister size are very large, it has been found by research that these fluids are very rich in cytokines and pro-inflammatory agents. So it can cause inflammatory reaction in your body, cytokine storm. So many centers they advocate that bigger size blister should be de-roofed and then you can cover it with either silver sulfatazine or collagen or silver dressing, whatever is available.
How to prevent contractures?
How to prevent contractures? Contractures are to be prevented that you use number of splints. You avoid, like in say in hands and fingers, what we use, the MP joints, that is metacarpophalangeal joint should be at 70 to 90 degrees of flexion, and IP joints, that is joints of finger, to be kept straight, and you make a splint. Now these splints are to be applied soon after the dressing. Whenever you are having a change of dressing, you encourage patient to move all the joints. Similarly, for knee, you can have a splint over the popliteal fossa, or you can make your patient lie prone. So with the help of gravity, you will avoid contracture formation.
If we rehydrate dressing, won't water increase chance?
वो तो बोल दिया आंसर कर दिया. I hope I have answered most of the questions. If you have any queries, you can always message Ritvik and I will come back to you.
Management of septicemia in a burns patient.
Management of septicemia in burn patient is itself a full-blown chapter. Kunal, I don't know whether you are a undergraduate student or postgraduate student. If you are a postgraduate student, I would recommend you to read something called Sepsis Survival Campaign, their latest edition. You will get all the answers there. But if you are an undergrad student, then I would tell you that the basic issues are you do the cultures and on basis of culture sensitivity, you put patients on antibiotics, you clean the wounds regularly, do the wound dressings, and you have to change the tubes regularly, that is urinary catheter, IV lines, your Riles tube, all these has to be changed in a laid down SOP every week or every third day, whatever the SOP of your center is.
The wounds are dynamic. How do we know in which stage a wound is and how does the treatment differ?
The treatment, the wound dynamics, that like I said, it will keep on changing every day. So you have to assess these patients regularly. The moment you see that your second degree superficial wound has becoming second degree deep burns, that means the fluid resuscitation was not adequate. So accordingly you have to address that problem.
How do we remove skin marks after healing in a mild burn?
Healing in a mild burn, skin marks, generally they settle by themselves in about 3 to 6 months time. You don't require anything extra other than using any emollient cream, that is coconut oil or normal commercially available cream. If you think that these scars are becoming hypertrophic, then you can use what is available in market is ointment based on Oleum Cipa and heparin extracts. Most common ones are Contract Tubex. which is available, that can be massaged over the area twice a day.
Uh, Sir, in cases of an electrical burn, what is the management?
Electrical burns itself is a very long talk. Uh, I think we can do a webinar sometime on electrical burns, and we can answer all the questions there. Because electrical burns, the wound appearance may be very small, but what happens because of the passage of current, it causes deep burns within the body, which is not visible from outside. So you can have myonecrosis if the muscles are burnt. You can have bone degeneration because of the bone is burnt inside, but you will not come to know on top because the skin will not show the wounds. These patients frequently go into myonecrosis and myoglobinuria, renal shutdown, and that is why they die, other than cardiac complications, which happens immediately.
Sir, does fasciotomy should be strictly done in OT?
Fasciotomy should be done in OT because if it starts bleeding, then you have more people on the ground to help you out.
In case of small hot water or oil burn, like while doing daily activities, what is the management?
The small accidents in kitchen, like I said, go to the nearest tap and open the water. Let the water flow onto the burnt area for 5 to 10 minutes or till the burning sensation goes down. That is what is required.
Why not to apply ice on wound?
I have already replied. It causes more damage, extreme of temperatures. Okay, I think that should be all. Thank you very much for patient hearing.